Welcome to the Making Money in the Music Business podcast, where we share insightful views on a variety of topics in the music industry that can help you make more money from your music business. And now, here are your hosts, Dr. William E. Smith and Kenya McGuire Johnson. So, hey, Kenya.
Hi, Will. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're
Good.
back.
Good. We're back.
For, is it podcast number 4?
Wow. That means
Already.
we're a month into this? What?
Yes, we are.
What?
Yes, we are. So I'm keeping with the tradition of surprising you.
I love it. It's like Christmas. It's like Christmas every Monday.
It's Christmas flashbacks.
Yes, Christmas flashbacks.
Because we get an opportunity to go back in time and remember our experiences. And
yes.
yeah. So this one is about touring.
Grueling touring, the gruels and joys of touring.
Yeah. Touring actually can be pretty fun.
Yes.
And that's, I think, why a lot of people romanticize it. And it becomes part of the musician's dream of being on tour and touring with all these musicians and whatever. But if you're putting on the tour, if you're an indie artist and starting your own tour, it can be pretty.
Oh my God!
What word would you use?
I'm just trying to be quiet. I don't want to. No. What word would I use? I would say intense. That was the word for me.
Great word.
Yeah, it was very intense, and intense can be, and very positive. Intensity can be a positive thing, but intensity can also be become a negative or a very overwhelming thing. So
right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, touring. So what should we talk about with touring? I know you always have these fantastic questions.
Well, yeah. If I usually try to approach it as if I was brand new to it and I had basic questions, but I'm not brand new, so I have an informed way of asking the question. So what I try to, I guess, if I was to ask you a question about it, would be what would be the best way to go about structuring your tour?
Wow. Well, yes, touring is a very, very interesting thing. And I while I have now done a few tours, I always preface by saying I'm no pro, but this is based on my experience and based on kind of, other independent artists that I know who have kind of gone about trying to do this on their own. And so when you say structure, that one of the things that you have to think about with the tour is, and you kind of said this earlier, why are you doing this tour?
Right.
Are you doing it because it sounds really cool? And it just sounds like that's what you as an artist should be on tour, because you hear the tour. But yeah, so you have to think about why you're kind of doing this. And I do think that the glamorous life, pops in a lot of heads, because that's going to impact your structure. So always, I say, start off small. Don't try to do, I'm going to do the entire United States. I'm going to go from California to New York. I mean, it's just...
Exactly.
Yeah. So I would say the first thing just to think about is small, and think about purpose, because then that will kind of dictate a little bit more of what's happening. If you're trying to purely experience other cities and purely just experience the flow of music in other areas, that's a very different structure than if you have a specific project that you're trying to promote. And that you're trying to do. And so I guess it's going to depend on what your purpose is.
Yeah, what I was thinking about was that when I started doing tours, or even whenever you approach a tour, there's a couple reasons for doing it, and a couple things driving you putting together a tour, and you want to promote a project that you're either putting out and you're trying to support the project with a tour, or another reason for doing a tour is you have a an anchor gig, some big performance that someone booked you for that's out of town, and you say, well, hey, I can make more out of this situation than normal by booking several other events nearby or on the way to.
Yep. That's a very good point.
That's sort of your impetus, basically, for putting together a tour, and it actually guides the structure of the tour.
Right. And it can even be a combination of that. Like, it could be that, maybe you got booked on one end, so then you decide, okay, I'm going to do a little bit of that. And then, I'm going to create my own schedule to kind of go beyond that. Or, I think I've done kind of a combination. And also, tour doesn't have to mean every day I'm on the road.
Right.
When I've done tours where, literally, when I go really, really far away, like internationally, then those shows are more, if not back to back, then, very close within a certain time frame. But when I did my quote unquote promotional tour for my first album, or my US based tour, I didn't just stay on the road. I would basically go out each weekend for several weekends. So I would come back home in between the shows. And, obviously budget wise, financial, which I'm sure we're going to get into, obviously kind of dictates a lot of how you also structure your tour.
Right. And touring is definitely different for indie artists than major label artists.
Ooh, yes.
A key distinction is these major labels have relationships with venues. So they don't have to sort of wait in timing to book their performances. So let's say they have a release for an artist coming up. They already know the date of the release, so they can plan the tour, the subsequent tour after it, and the venues that they'll be booking already have that relationship. So they can. It's not difficult for them to make the phone call to get the date and get all that set up, so they can actually have a run of dates in different towns.
Right.
Whereas in indie artists, you're fighting for space. So
you're fighting for space, and this is what I mean, because it's weird. I guess I've been a little bit caught in two worlds. While I'm not a signed, artist, I don't have a label running, because my own company runs much like, a label, or I have it try to run. I try very hard to make things run machine-like, so that the planning isn't, is as organized as possible. So I know that I used kind of the model, a little bit of what a label does for their setting up things, in the sense that by the time it was time for me to perform, I really tried to reach out to those venues that I did have relationships with.
Right.
And, really create my quote unquote tour based on what I could get booked, with these previous relationships. So it wasn't like I know for me, I really didn't pitch myself to new venues. And this is also then becomes important about the timing at which you decide you're ready for a tour, because I was at the point where I had performed enough at different places that the relationships were formed. So I felt like, okay, I think I can do a tour where I actually kind of, put these venues together in a certain time frame.
And we're coming back to this theme of relationships from the last podcast, but that's exactly how you're able to build a tour. You've performed at certain venues and you've built those relationships. So one thing I tell musicians too, who travel with other artists that are performing, I tell them when they perform in a venue, get to know the venue owner.
Yeah.
Or the person booking the venue. So basically what you're doing while you're on tour with other artists, you're able to create that relationship. So when it's time for your recording release, you actually have a tour built in.
Yes. And you should be doing that all the time. Like anytime you're in a space of a venue, oh my gosh, you need to be, even if you're not even performing, you need to be figuring out if it's a space that you're digging or you feel like it fits your style, format of music. Yeah, you should be making right off the bat, find out who's the manager, who's kind of managing things tonight. Yeah, no, absolutely.
If you're out of town on a business trip or you're visiting family somewhere, just go stop by venues that have music that's in your genre.
Yeah, yeah. You would be very surprised. I mean, I know I did that on many occasions, and I could go through a variety of venues. It's funny. I have a story. There's a venue actually here in Chicago where I'm based that I really, really wanted to play at. And, they had pretty, regionally, nationally touring, mainstream kind of artists. And so I was like, oh, Lord, I don't know if I'll ever be able to. But then I would kind of see some, certain local acts. And I'm like, well, no, it gave me hope. And so the approach that I took, and it was some of this was again, Forrest Gump. We talked about this, Forrest Gump landing. And, so it wasn't as planned. There is an artist that I really, really love in terms of music, and his name is Jared Lawson, and he's based in Portland, Oregon. And he and I had been on a show together in London, or actually in the UK. Not right in London, but outside of London in the UK. And we kind of have similar, we're in that he's soul jazz and, similar followings. Still, he's huge abroad, but still trying to kind of break here in the States. And I had seen him live many times and love his music, and he's amazing. And I really wanted to see him here in Chicago. I was like, I've seen you all these other places, but never in Chicago. So I actually was like, God, I think I know a good venue for you. And so I was it was that venue that I also kind of was like, God, it'd be great if I could get there too. But I had actually found out the manager to talk more about how can we bring this other artist here, because he's really phenomenal. And I gave him some more stuff. And at that time, I wasn't so much doing it because I wanted to be there. I just knew this would be a good fit for this artist.
Right.
But anyway, long story short, he ended up getting booked there. And so then the manager, and it turned out to be a good show. And so who did the manager remember? Who hooked that up? Right. Kenya did. And so when I came to the manager months later and said, and by the way, here's my press kit, and I'm an artist, and I've done shows with Jared Lawson, so the caliber now because you saw him perform. And so he gave me a chance, and the show nearly sold out and did really, really strong. So that was a very a little bit of a Forrest Gump, but also about this relationship building and taking opportunities and, however they may come. We will have to do another podcast about how you build those relationships and what's the etiquette around that. But, so those are definitely, those are ways to be thinking about your structure.
And also, you had something to give to him. You had a press kit. You had a recording,
right,
which is what our other podcasts were about. So you got to have something to give to people, and that's why we first started out our whole podcast series with basically putting together a recording, because people won't really pay attention to you unless you have something recorded.
Yeah. It's useless to try to do a tour without having product, because it's twofold. One is the venues obviously need to hear you and see that you're at that level of your game. in your music career. And then two, for you to make your money, you to sell merchandise at these shows. This is the perfect.
Exactly.
Yes, this is the perfect. This is it, because you are your own store nowadays.
Yep.
And people still, while people will not go to the store to go buy CDs, they will definitely buy CDs after a show. They still will do that. And it's funny. I've even had people say, I don't even know how I'm going to play this. I don't think I have a CD player anymore. But they still buy it. It's like, I'll figure it out. So, yeah, you got to have product.
Yeah. And there's, I have a Forrest Gump moment as well. And this is something that is useful and to pay attention to when you're when you are on tour, or when you're ever doing any big performances. There are people out there in the audience watching who actually have other events, and they'll want to book you on their event based on your performance at this event. So I did the Anguilla Jazz Festival, and there was a guy out there who booked the Bonaire Jazz Festival, and he saw how we did our show, and he was like, yeah, we'd be perfect for our jazz festival. So can you come on down? So we actually made a tour out of a tour.
Yes. But it's I think it's very common. I think it happens, very often. I don't know if you heard that little ching. I have all these sounds. Did you just hear a little
No.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to sound crazy saying that. But anyway, I have all these sounds coming up on my phone. Anyway, but yeah, no, that's common. You're going to have people, and even if it's not a major, booking agent for a festival, you still have people who have events and who may be trying to hire an artist for, a small thing that they're trying to put on. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity. And this is why performance becomes such a big deal. No better audition than you doing your show. That's proof in the pudding. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's just how things happen. I mean, you create your own luck basically, and once you have something rolling, then everybody else wants to basically be on the bandwagon, and they want to draw that energy. So if you bring a lot of energy to your performances and you're succeeding, people are booking you, everybody else wants to be a part of that. So they see their energy. So
absolutely.
Just basically get started, and things will start to happen.
And get started and do it small. Like I said, do it small. I do think, in my opinion, I think that before you try to do a whole tour, you should at least perform outside of your state or outside of your city. Just isolate it kind of in these, just so that one, you're building the relationships, two, you're getting a sense of what it's like to travel and perform, because that is another really, that's the intense part. That's the gruel is the travel. I mean, if you could just pop on a stage, if you could just, what is the little genie? She wiggles her nose or whatever. I mean, and then you're on the stage, dressed and all the equipment, sound checks done. I mean, if that was the case, then yeah, I'd tour all day. But there's a lot that goes around that, and I'm sure you're going to get into that. But yeah.
Well, let's do that. Should you get a tour manager, or when should you get a tour manager?
Well, I definitely think you should, and I made this mistake, and I will never do this again. I won't ever do this again. Yes, if you don't want to call it manager, you need to get a tour buddy. You need to get somebody, Manager sounds very exquisite and glamorous and, all of that, but you need somebody. I highly recommend you get somebody who is not performing on that stage with you, who can be there. And I made the mistake of doing my U.S.-based tour. I think I had somebody with me maybe on one of the cities I did, but the rest I did that on my own. And it was I will never do that again. It was, I don't want to say the word miserable, but I think I'm going to have to say that because it wasn't miserable performing. The performances were wonderful.
It's just a different level of stress. It's just
my God.
a whole, because what it is you're basically the chaperone for a bunch of cats, because musicians are like herding cats, and I'm one of them. And I will tell you that getting musicians to be at a specific time with everything they're supposed to have,
oh my God,
is a challenge, and I know it because I mean that's just I came from that mindset, and running my own band, I had to realize that okay, this is not how you do anything. So
no, it is really, and I mean, I can't, not everybody has the resources to have, a tour buddy or to have somebody, but I know that for me, at least, I will, if I know that I have to do multiple cities. Now, if I'm just going to one city, this week, and then 3 weeks later, I'm going somewhere else, then no, I don't necessarily need that, even though it is really nice to always have that whenever you're traveling outside of your, territory. But, it's just like what you just said, because even you've got to manage the band, but beyond that, now you're also having to represent yourself with the venue manager. So any and everything, any business transaction, any contract, when you're doing your sound check, when you're doing the hotel, when you're trying to figure out, transportation, you're it if you don't have anybody, kind of helping you. And so I highly recommend you get somebody, either, yes, to be a tour manager or to be an assistant. Honestly, just to even keep you calm, just to help, exactly. Just to help you, I mean, I could go on so many stories. What I did, I've had one of my producers, who I mention a lot because he's more than a producer in my music life. Kendall Duffy he's a very weird, I'm going to say weird because he's an anomaly. I don't think very many producers can wear as many hats as he does. I kind of call him the baby face. He's my baby face because he does more than just, baby face is more than just sitting in a studio.
Right.
Coming up with music. He knows that obviously he's running a business, and I know that Toni Braxton, when I hear her talk about Babyface, it reminds me a lot about how I feel about Kendall in the sense that he does mentoring and way beyond that. And so Kendall has been more of my kind of tour assistant. And when I told him this last time that I did not travel with him, I was like, why didn't you like shoot me? Like why did that happen? And so I told him, look, if I ever do tours or whatever, you're my first go-to, because I can't, it's too much. And he does a really good job of, he's not a manager per se, so he's not sitting up managing me per se. I'm kind of telling him, this is what I need to get done. This is how I want things to be. And then he makes sure when we're actually physically on the tour, he's just making sure those action items or that itinerary or whatever is all being met, so that I can. And
it's always helpful to have two eyes on anything. So even if you have an assistant manager, whatever you call it, there's another person helping organize what's going on. You can double check if you feel bored. Just double check the itinerary and make sure everything's working. And sometimes somebody went to go off to get something to eat. One of your bass player or your drummer,
and you can't find him,
and you can't find that person.
Oh my God! And we're supposed to start in 2 minutes.
Having another person being able to go get that person while you're still on stage, or you're getting on a plane, or whatever it is, it's always good to have a second individual available to help or keep things together, basically.
Right. And it's worth if that person, you obviously a major label tour manager or whatever, they're paid a nice little fee and, all of that. But, an independent artist most often does not have that budget, but it is worth whatever that person says they need. You need to figure it out. Because, some people may say,
Exactly.
what, I just need you to cover my, my hotels or whatever and, the transportation, and then we're good. Or it may be, can you just make sure I get a meal here and there? But it's worth it. And I say that needs to be a part of your budget line that's an additional, person that you need to be including. And also when you're trying to decide, if you don't have a manager or you don't have, like I had, someone like a Kendall or whatever, and you're trying to, you're going to ask your friend or you're going to ask, a family member, don't do it based on just, oh, I like you. Because you will then now have to start babysitting. That becomes the eighth musician or whatever.
Exactly.
I mean, if they don't know what they're doing.
No. You want somebody who's on top of the game more so than you.
Exactly.
So they'll keep you in mind.
Yes. And it's always a bonus if that person and you are good friends. And, obviously that makes it much more pleasant. But if you have to find somebody, look at, again, that work ethic, their organization skills, their communication skills, their temperament. That's a huge, huge part. I have this running joke last time I went to London, the person who served as kind of our tour manager, I cannot believe my phone is like lighting up. It never, ever rings. So I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I just hung up on that person. But, the last time I went, we had a person who actually, one of the other artists who I toured with, it's her business manager, but she served as kind of our whole kind of tour manager for the tour. And her temperament, is like a pillow, like a soft pillow. I mean, she's so supportive and so calm and so, direct when necessary, but never in a way that makes you as the artist feel off. Just a really perfect temperament for that job. And and Kendall's the same way. He's very, calm, very direct, very organized. So make sure you're looking at that. And it's worth the dollars, guys. If you have to pay a little bit more to get them on board, if you got to pay for their flight or half or whatever, make it happen, because it will save you in so many ways. You'll be a better performer. You'll be on your game better, if you have that.
Yeah. This is not a road trip. This is a tour.
No, this is work.
Exactly.
It's
a job.
Work. It's a job. Yes. So, which is another thing that people forget.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they think it's one big party. So there are party times, but you have to treat it like it's a job. And and with that in mind, to finance your tour, I'll go back to what I said about the anchor gig. If you're able to get a gig that really pays well and is also flying you out there, that's your opportunity to actually build a tour.
Absolutely.
And so support that one performance with these other smaller performances.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. There's no other word about it. Do that. If you're in a position where somebody is paying for everything, and you are, you've got time on your hands and, you can kind of make some things happen in that area, or you have some connections or some kind of wherewithal where you can, obviously there's usually clauses and contracts, particularly for venues like that that pay for everything for you, where you can't perform, so many miles close to their venue.
To them. Exactly.
Yeah. But if you're on the East Coast, obviously the East Coast, there's a lot, between from your Boston all the way down, really, all the way down to Atlanta, really. That whole coast, you can really hit a lot, if you've got the time and if you've planned things and, have got the venues and relationships. So that I would
even say if you're really into this for the long haul, I would say take whatever proceeds that you get from that one big gig and invest it in a tour on down the coast.
Yep.
I mean,
particularly if you have a new project, or if you have something that you're really trying to get, heard, or you're really trying to step up your game as an artist and get the awareness. out there of who you are. And again, these venues don't have, don't get in your head, oh, I'm trying to be, I always use House of Blues because it's a nationwide and people are familiar with its size. But, you don't need to have those size. They can be these small, it may be a cafe over here. It may be a small little, I don't know, restaurant over there. It may be this really, this little book space. I mean, you have to get kind of creative with that. It doesn't have to be these big glamorous things. The other thing that you can think about is producing your own show in some meaning then that you're actually renting out a little bit of a space. Let's say, for instance, you've got this great anchor gig. I'm
gonna cut in here because
okay, I'm sorry.
What we'll do is I know that's one of your expertise is putting together your own show. So we'll have a whole separate podcast for putting together your own booking your own venues. Yeah. And putting your own shows together. So we'll table that one.
Okay, let's table it. But that's also something to think about. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, so just thinking about how to pay for this. If you don't have an anchor gig, the other way of doing that is you're just going to have to budget and find out what each gig is paying and try to put it together. And the only way for you to really even judge your numbers is for you to have performed locally. And that's why you need to perform as much as you can locally so you can understand how many CDs that you sell, T-shirts that you sell, so you can actually gauge your numbers and then try to really plan and budget for a bona fide tour.
Right. No, that's really good that you said that because you once you start going into the tour mind, then your music business hat automatically, whether you want it on your head or not, it needs to be on your head and quick. And so, sitting down and financially, like what you were just saying, trying to estimate draw, CD, expenses, band, all of that stuff. If you've never had to negotiate that, or you've never, you've only played for free down the way, you're going to have a difficult time really even conceptualizing what it is you will need financially. So, my recommendation is definitely, hold off on touring until you've gained that experience and that awareness of those numbers so that you can even do an estimate.
Plan for it. Exactly.
Like that. Yeah.
Yep. So that's a lot. I mean, there's a lot more other stuff that we can go into, and maybe people have questions about touring.
It is a lot. I do want to say one other thing about touring too. When you're, there's a lot to say about touring, but two things. If you're in a state like California, which is a really big state, really long state, like the north and south sides of California, your LA to your Bay Area are both two really big music hubs. And so you can do a tour of just California.
Right, exactly.
Because California is so big and it's such a entertainment kind of space. So, you can be in Southern California and hit a couple of spaces because you've got your San Diego, you've got your LA, and then you can get more mid-state, and then you can go more in the Bay Area, and you may hit, from your Sacramento to your San Jose to your, so there's ways. I know an artist, her name is Tracy Cruz, and she did a tour, but it was only a California tour, and she had several dates. She had a whole bunch of dates. And it was, she admitted it was very grueling, and it was, but it was a huge learning experience, and it increased her draw, and it was close enough where she wasn't so far, the cost around transportation and, all of that was more economical because she wasn't flying out of state or having to go on a train or a bus all the way. So think about that too. If you're in an area like that with a state that's kind of big like that, or maybe even if it's not such big of a state, maybe you can hit I know here in Chicago, we're close to Wisconsin and we're close to Minnesota. We're close to Indiana and we're close to Michigan. We're all together. Right. So the tour may be more of a Midwest thing where, we're just kind of hitting this region as opposed to just, I'm going to get all the way over to New York and then go all the way back to LA and then get all the way back down to Nashville and, try to keep it regionally. Maybe when you're, starting off.
That's a perfect depiction of what you should be trying to do. Whenever you're doing tours, I would definitely, especially as an indie artist, keep it regional. Definitely. That's the takeaway from that, because it really it maximizes your dollars, because flying from one area to another increases your costs. So if you can just fly to one area and then rent a car or rent or whatever, a van or whatever you need to carry your equipment in, it just keeps the cost way down. So that's definitely a good suggestion.
Right.
So
now I do have one little small caveat to that, though. I know we just said this illustrious, wonderful thing, right? Just to confuse the listener just a little bit. We always got to do that, right? Just to confuse you a little bit. The only thing that I would say, though, and this is what happened to me. So this is why I bring it up. You also, though, should be, if there is a way for you to go into your website and look at your analytics, your Google,
there you go,
to see kind of what demographics, what cities are actually listening or clicking on your website or playing. And I know, like with my website, I can see anytime somebody plays a song on my website, anytime somebody visits a website, because I had music that went on radio, then I got radio reports, so I was able to see the exact cities that the song was being played. And so what happened in my situation, Milwaukee wasn't doing anything. Milwaukee wasn't playing any of my stuff. And, Detroit wasn't really playing my stuff. But they're playing my stuff in Atlanta. They're playing my stuff in Virginia. So that forced me to go where my numbers exist,
exactly.
And where the radio is actually playing me. So it kind of forced my hand, and that's how I got international. That's how I got to go abroad, was because when you looked at my numbers and you looked at who was buying my music or listening or the radio stations playing it, London is really high up in there. So it was like, okay, I got to get there because those people actually are already, listening to me. So I got to figure out a way, because I know that my shows will be profitable, because it's showing me that they're, so that was the one caveat. Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually a very important thing to approach your business with is metrics. What are your numbers? And that's so totally on point, is that you need to be addressing your numbers. Don't just like pick a region on a map and say, I'm going to go here. There needs to be a reason for you to go there. Yes, maybe you were booked out there. Maybe you're visiting family, whatever it is. But if you're really trying to function as a business, that's what businesses do. And that's what major labels do. They go by the numbers. They look and see where this artist is really selling. So that's a very key point. I totally support that.
Yeah, right. So like I said, it kind of varies, but you should be able to find where you lie in all of these things that we're kind of saying, and be able to discern, okay, I'm not really on the radio yet, but yeah, grandma lives in Wisconsin. I have a buddy over here. I think I have a connection over there in Minnesota. Okay, I think I can do a regional. You know what I mean? So it may be that. It may be that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was good. There's a lot of it's chock full of information on this one.
It was. Touring is, you can do part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because there are a lot. But I'm glad that we at least touched on, because the structure and how you go about thinking about it, and then the financials, like you said, having the awareness of knowing, to create that budget and then decide from there, how the money, is going to look.
And if you all have any questions about any of the stuff that we're covering, definitely shoot us an email, and we'll address it in future podcasts.
Yes. please, yes. You can do an email to info@creatingcrimson.com. And I will share all of that with Will. And please ask your questions. And if you have topics, maybe we said something and it clicked, it triggered something in your mind that you would like to hear us talk more about, and we haven't, we didn't touch on it in this discussion or whatever. Say that too.
Yep.
Make sure you share that.
We'll be able to follow up on that. And if you want to direct message me, or you can reach me at drw smith at makingmoneyinthemusicbiz.com. drw smith.
Yeah, say that again. That was I got lost. Say it again.
drw smith at makingmoneyinthemusicbiz.com.
Woo, wonderful. Yeah, I had to make just an info. Yeah, because I just info at info at whatever is a great thing.
I might make one of those just to have.
To make it info at.
Yeah, it's just me, so I just keep it personal. So
yeah.
That's cool. Well, good. Well, I can't wait for our next podcast.
I can't either. These are good. These are fun. And we are getting some nice listeners. I'm looking at the people, the clicks on. So I'm game. Let's keep it going.
Please subscribe and tell your friends.
Yes, absolutely. Next time. Bye.